My parents believed my older sister and her fake evidence that I betrayed the family to pay for college, but 10 years later, they realized their mistake when they lost everything. 10 years ago, my family kicked me out of the house because they assumed, seemingly, that I'd betrayed them to pay for my university tuition. I was only 18, about to go off to college, when my parents told me they no longer wanted me living in their house. This all happened thanks to my older sister, Janine. She's 4 years older than me and had always been the golden child of the family. There was no doubt about that. It was clear from my childhood that no matter what I did, Janine would always do it better. So, I didn't even bother to compete. She went to business school and everyone was so proud of her. But when I got accepted into a prestigious university in the UK to study history, she didn't take it well. My parents made it very clear they couldn't afford my tuition, so I had to figure it out on my own. I even asked them to help me get a student loan and co-sign it, but they said they didn't want to take on that risk. That was pretty disappointing, and we argued a lot about it. They had paid for Janine's college, but they claimed that sending me was too expensive, and they had to think about their future first since they were planning to start a business. And they didn't want to take on any more risks than they could afford. I didn't know what to do because it felt like they were trying to make things extra difficult for me, just so I would give up on the opportunity. They had already told me they couldn't help with tuition, and I knew there was no way they would help with other expenses like travel and living costs. I knew once I got there, I could work to pay for my studies, but I would still need some help with the tuition. With no other option, I decided to reach out to my aunt. My aunt is my dad's older sister, and to be honest, she's a much better person than my parents. We've always had a good relationship, but I know my dad didn't like her much, and neither did my mom, so I tried to keep my distance from her. We only saw each other at family gatherings. I had to talk to her whenever I knew my dad wasn't around because he really didn't like her. He thought she was a bit arrogant, and whenever he saw her, it apparently made him feel small. However, in her defense, I don't think it was really her fault. For context, she's 7 years older than my dad and is a neurosurgeon. My dad's not a failure, but in comparison, everyone would say she's the more successful one of the two. My parents are both dentists and they were doing well, but my dad always had the habit of comparing himself to his sister. No matter how hard she tried to be his friend, he kept feeling jealous of her, and he was so insecure he couldn't even imagine being her friend. She had told me all these things after I got close to her once I was kicked out of my own home and ended up living with her until it was time for me to go to university. We really bonded after I got kicked out because she became my only friend and confidant. Since then, we've been very close. I'm really grateful to Jenin for making sure this happened. After I asked my aunt for help, she happily agreed, and I begged her to keep it a secret because I didn't want my dad to find out. He would lose his mind if he knew I asked his sister for money. But somehow, Janine found out. One day, when I came home after hanging out with my friends, I noticed all my things were packed in boxes, ready to be moved. My parents were sitting in the living room, ready to confront me with a pile of papers in their hands, and Janine standing beside them with the most arrogant expression on her face. I still can't forget that image, because even though it's been a decade since that day, I'll never forget or forgive the kind of humiliation I had to face that day. My dad told me that Janine had given them proof that I had betrayed the family to pay for my tuition. I had no idea what he was talking about. I knew they'd figured out I had asked my aunt for help, but I never said I betrayed the family. I tried to explain that I had no other option, which is why I went to her. Then my dad threw the papers he was holding in my face, and when I looked at them, I realized they were completely fake. Screenshots of emails that supposedly had been exchanged between my aunt and me. Somehow, Janine had created very edited emails between my aunt and me, where it seemed like I had given her my parents' business model and other details of the company, along with a list of potential investors in exchange for her paying my tuition. I don't know how Janine came up with something like this. I have to admit, it was a very clever move, and I can't imagine how many hours it took her to come up with such a twisted plan and execute it. The emails looked very authentic, and anyone would have believed they were real. However, when I looked at those papers, I immediately told my parents they weren't real and explained that Janine was trying to deceive them just to have me kicked out. I even offered to open my laptop and show them the truth, but they said they believed my sister and trusted her implicitly. They wanted me out of the house right then. I begged them to let me stay, because although I hated them with all my heart at that moment, I didn't want to be a burden to my aunt as she was already paying for my university. I didn't want to end up living with her too, but my parents wouldn't budge. They said they wanted me to leave because I had betrayed them and they couldn't stand me anymore. So I had to leave and ended up going to live with my aunt, who treated me with the utmost kindness and respect, something I never received from my parents. Since then, she has been my only family. My parents never contacted me after that, and the only person who wrote to me after the incident was Janine, but only to tell me she was glad I had left. Her message was vague, so I couldn't use it against her. All she said was that I shouldn't leave my laptop lying around and that she had known something was wrong the moment I stopped fighting with our parents over the money for university. I had told a few of my friends about it, and I have a habit of leaving my laptop open, but generally only in my room. So, I guess she had been snooping around my room to find something against me. When she realized I had stopped fighting with our parents, she must have thought I had gotten the money I needed. That's how she found the information. She probably took screenshots of other emails and then edited and arranged everything with Photoshop. If anyone is still wondering how she managed to do it, it took me a long time to figure it out myself, so I hope this satisfies the curiosity of anyone who asks. It's not important, but I thought I should mention it anyway. After that, I had no contact with my family, and my aunt supported me through everything. She sent me to university, and later, when I graduated, she let me live with her until I found a job and could move out. I had hoped maybe I could see my family at events or holidays, but they cut ties with the rest of our family as well. My aunt told me it was because now that they had started their own business, they were too proud and thought they were above everyone else since things were going relatively well for them. My parents were dentists, and my mom really loved being in the kitchen, just like my dad, so they started a dessert shop selling tooth-friendly treats. It was a pretty unique concept, and they were doing quite well. However, once they started having success, they cut ties with the rest of the family, which is why no one had heard from them in the last 10 years. But then the pandemic hit a couple of years ago, and many businesses like theirs took a serious hit. I guess they did too, which probably explains why my parents decided to contact me a couple of days ago. I don't know where they got my number from, and it was completely unexpected, but I was at work when they called. My mom asked if I had a moment to talk. I was about to hang up without even responding, but I tried to deal with it calmly and told her I would talk to her once I got home, to give myself some time to think if I even wanted to speak to her. After all, it had been 10 years since the last time I spoke to my parents, and I was also a little curious as to why they were calling me after all this time. So, once I got home from work, I decided to call them back. When I did, at first, they tried to make small talk, but I told them to stop with that because it was just making me more upset. I told them to stop beating around the bush. Finally, my mom told me that the real reason she was calling was to apologize and make things right with me. She wanted me to come meet her and my dad because they had realized what a huge mistake they had made 10 years ago when they kicked me out in favor of my sister. That decision had really backfired on them. She hinted at certain things during our phone call, and I tried to get her to talk about them, but she said she wanted me to visit her and my dad the next day so we could talk things over in detail. I tried very hard to make her talk on the phone, but she insisted I visit them in person. So, I went to their house the next afternoon after work. I was really surprised when the address they gave me wasn't the house I grew up in, but an apartment in a really bad neighborhood. I had no idea why they had to move from our old house to an apartment like this, but once I sat down with them and talked to them, I realized it was because I had correctly assumed the business had suffered a lot during the pandemic, and unfortunately, they had to sell their house and many of their assets to stay afloat because they weren't making money. My parents seemed happy to see me, but they mainly just wanted to talk about how hard things had been for them. They told me that even during the pandemic, my sister, with her business degree, had the brilliant idea to sell everything they had to stay on top of bills instead of closing the business temporarily and starting over later. She thought it would be a better idea to invest even more money to get things going after the first phase. That turned out to be a mistake, because it didn't take off as they had hoped. Even after the pandemic passed, the business was still struggling, but Janine had faith that it would work out. However, my parents really regretted investing all their money in it, as now they were the ones facing the losses. They told me that apparently, Janine takes all the money they make from the business and keeps it mostly for herself, giving them just enough to survive. Since she took over the business a couple of years ago, she made them sign all the documents because they assumed she would be capable and competent. They never imagined she would treat them like this, but they were struggling to get by, and most of the money made from the business went into her pockets. They had to beg her for money every time. They had no other option as they had already given her everything they had in the past, and now they were completely ruined. So, of course, now they were asking me for help. And that's the real reason they had reconnected with me after 10 years, asking if I would be willing to help in this difficult situation. But I immediately told them I had bad news for them, because there was no way I could help or support them. It's not that I couldn't afford it, I simply didn't think they deserved it. They never cared about me, so now that they were in trouble, it seemed unreasonable for them to expect me to help. I told them all this straight to their faces because I had guessed this was why they were calling. Besides, they were dentists, so they could always go back to working in their profession instead of just waiting for everything to be solved by their daughters, first the business and now asking me for money. Anyway, after telling them I couldn't help or support them, I decided to get up and leave. My parents tried to stop me and said I shouldn't act like this, that they were counting on me, since my sister had turned her back on them. I didn't even bother explaining. I told them it was really sad that my sister had done that to them, but I was doing the same because I didn't owe anyone anything. Then, I left as soon as I could. But they've been bothering me ever since, trying to call me from different numbers and sending me messages saying I need to help them because they're in serious financial trouble. I don't think anyone would think I'm the bad one here for not helping. But those are the rules, and you have to ask. Am I the bad one for not helping my parents after they believed my sister instead of me? Update 1. Thank you so much for your comments. I will stand firm in my decision not to help my parents because they don't deserve it. As I mentioned before, I also discussed this with my aunt, and she said that if my dad really needed help that much, he could have turned to her after I rejected him. But he chose not to. Anyway, it's not our problem what they're going through. It's been 10 years since they kicked me out, and they couldn't even offer me a sincere and honest apology. They only contacted me because they wanted my support. It makes me angry every time I think about it, and I feel like I shouldn't have even responded to them in the first place. But at least I did my part and visited them, although I have to admit part of it was out of curiosity. Even then, they couldn't offer a proper apology to try to repair our relationship. It was also pretty stupid of them to keep investing more money into their business and their daughter, knowing there was a pandemic going on and having no idea if they would survive or not. I don't think anyone should carry the consequences of their stupid decisions, so they can keep texting me and trying to reach out. I'm not going to let it bother me. Update 2. Hello. 2 weeks ago, I visited my parents, and after that, I barely had any contact with them. They kept trying to talk to me, but I didn't respond. After a week, they even stopped trying, so I thought they were done. My aunt was expecting my dad to reach out to her instead, but that didn't happen either, and we were both pretty relieved. However, last night, Janine showed up at my house. I don't know how she found out where I live, but I wasn't expecting her. The cherry on top was that my aunt had come over for dinner that night, so Janine was able to talk to both of us at the same time. When I saw her standing outside through the peephole, I decided not to let her in. I even told her that we weren't willing to talk to her and that she needed to leave. However, she was quite argumentative and said that what she needed to discuss with us was urgent and that she had no interest in being around us unless we heard her out. She told me she would wait outside all night if necessary, and she knew my aunt was inside because she had seen the car parked outside. Eventually, I had to let her in because I didn't want any drama outside my house. Once inside, she sat down and started telling us she knew about the conversation I had with my parents 2 weeks ago. She said it wasn't right to reject them and that they were very disappointed with the way I had behaved. At that point, I was pretty irritated because she had no right to comment on how I should behave. She was the one who kicked me out all those years ago, and she's the main reason I don't have a good relationship with my parents. Besides, my parents weren't good parents in the first place. Then she went on to say that now that I had disappointed my parents again, she was giving me the chance to redeem myself. She also told my aunt that I hadn't been a good sister to my dad for many years. This was our chance to do better, she said. Janine said she wanted me to invest in the business so she could keep it going without losing more. She said this could be our payment because my parents had done so much for me. She even reminded my aunt of certain childhood incidents where my dad had been there for her. Clearly, it was a script she had prepared with our parents, and now she was trying it on us. Unfortunately for her and my parents, we're not that emotional, and we're definitely not stupid. I got really angry and told her to leave. She made it seem like there was something really urgent to discuss, but this was what she considered urgent. I didn't care. When I told her to leave, we started arguing. She said I was being really cruel because our parents had many health problems, and it seemed like I didn't care. I told her that even if I did care, I wouldn't be willing to do anything until they apologized sincerely, which seemed unlikely since they didn't even think they had anything to apologize for. My aunt said that the way things were going was despicable and that Janine needed to leave. After that, things got really ugly. We had a nasty verbal fight. Janine said many things that were out of line, and I ended up doing the same. All the resentment I had been holding on to for the past 10 years came to the surface and came out of my mouth. We were very close to having a physical fight, but my aunt intervened and told Janine to leave because she was provoking me. She didn't want a physical confrontation because it wouldn't end well for either of us. Eventually, Janine left after a lot of cursing and fighting. It's been a day since then, but I still haven't gotten over it. My aunt stayed the night because she could see I was in a really bad state. I had a complete breakdown after Janine left and started crying over how terrible she had made me feel. I felt like I had gone back to my childhood when everyone was against me, and it was really traumatic. Anyway, I'm feeling a bit better now, but I'm still pretty angry and hurt. Update 3. Hello, it's been 3 days since my last update. This morning, my aunt told me that she received a call from her brother. She said he planned to visit him in the afternoon, so I told her I would go with her to prevent them from ambushing her and trying to manipulate her like they tried to do with me. My aunt is more compassionate, and I thought it would be easier to deal with her. So, I told her I would go with her. A couple of hours ago, I visited my parents again, but this time with my aunt. When we arrived, my parents seemed surprised to see me, but they pretended everything was fine and started telling my aunt the same things they had told me. I interrupted them midway and told them she already knew everything because she was the only one who had been on good terms with me after they kicked me out. I had told her everything because she's my family. I interrupted their speech, and after that, they didn't know how to victimize themselves anymore because I had exposed them. So they directly asked my aunt if she would be willing to help them with money. My aunt tried to be diplomatic and said she would think about it, but she needed time. She told them not to bother her like they had tried to do with me in the past. That's when my parents became defensive and said they weren't trying to bother me. They were just trying to take care of themselves because they were in desperate need, and desperate times require desperate measures. So, I took the opportunity and confronted them about what they had done. I asked them if I had been desperate for financial support or any sense of stability when I wanted to go to university, but they never offered to help me. And now, all of a sudden, they expected the family to help them. That seemed unrealistic and unfair to me. I told them I hadn't asked for an explanation the first time I visited because they didn't have anything satisfactory to say, and honestly, I didn't care. But now, since they insisted on asking for help, I wanted them to explain their actions because none of this made sense. Once I asked them to explain their past actions, they started making up a bunch of excuses for why they did what they did. I don't know why it was so hard for them to just admit that they didn't like me in the past and that they had always preferred my sister over me. It would have been so easy. All they had to do was admit it, and I would have known they were being honest and sincere, at least now. But they kept trying to find various reasons for why they treated me the way they did, mostly trying to blame me by pretending I wasn't really connected with them and that I acted very differently from my sister, who tried and really put effort into getting along with them. They spoke as if we were all in a relationship and I wasn't making any effort, as if I wasn't literally their daughter and they were the ones who should have made an effort to make me feel comfortable and safe, which they never did. It was honestly fun to watch them desperately try because I knew they had no real reason, and they didn't want to be honest because they wanted to play it safe and be clever. But I could see right through them and let them keep going while I said nothing, just watching them struggle with my aunt. By the end, realizing they had nothing to say to justify or defend themselves, they ended up saying they hadn't counted on me being the more successful sister, and that's why they treated me like that. It was so hard not to laugh out loud because even though it was incredibly insulting, it was also so funny since they were literally assuring us that they shouldn't be helped at all. Once they finished, my aunt and I told them we would think about supporting them and let them know in a couple of days. Then we left, and they really asked us to at least consider it because it would help them a lot, and also Janine. It was hard for me not to roll my eyes in front of them. But anyway, after we left, my aunt and I had a small discussion and concluded that we weren't going to give them any money. I knew that from the start, but my aunt had her doubts. Either way, we'll tell them in a few days and I'll be back with another update. Update 4. We just came back from a diner near my aunt's house because we didn't want to be at her place when we told them we wouldn't help them. I had an idea before giving them the answer, to ask if they were willing to cut ties with my sister in exchange for the money they wanted. I saw it as a kind of test. But the answer was pretty obvious, with them saying they couldn't cut their golden child out of their lives. Of course, they didn't say golden child, but that's how others see it from the outside. Some might think that if they had said yes, I would have lent them money, but the truth is I already knew the answer. I just wanted to confirm it. And even if they had said yes, it would probably have been a lie. When they responded that way, I told them it was fine, but we wouldn't be lending them any money, partly because my sister was responsible for the business failing so badly, so it would be a bad investment for us. My mom almost had a breakdown because she got really nervous. Maybe it was because this was her last option before losing the business. Things were so bad that at one point, she knocked over a coffee cup, and it fell to the ground. She didn't do it on purpose, but it was clear this was affecting her. Anyway, when we saw there wasn't much more to say, we got up and left with my aunt, although we forgot part of the bill. My aunt didn't realize, but I noticed it right away and just left. That's all for now. I hope there's no more to update in the future, but if there is, I'll return with Update 5. Update 5. It's been 3 months since my last post here, and just the other day while I was looking for something on Reddit, I saw some notifications from people asking about my story, so I decided to give an update here instead of replying to each person personally. In the end, my parents' business closed because their golden child couldn't do anything to save it. What's interesting are the things that came to light when it all finally happened. First, the reason my parents didn't return to being dentists, even though it's a very lucrative profession, is that my dad lost his license because a patient sued him. I won't go into details because I'm not sure if it's legal to talk about, but he lost his job. That's why they didn't want to pay for my university. They were using their savings at the time and were about to start the business. I know all this because they had a meeting with my aunt. They still have some kind of relationship, but I haven't seen them. My mom could still be working, but she was tired and wanted to do something else. So, once the idea for this business came up, she jumped in as soon as she could. At least she still has her license, which allows them to stay afloat now because she's the only one working between the two of them. My dad can't practice anymore, nor does he want to take another job that he doesn't think is up to his standards, as he said. But, well, it's not like a dentist's salary and the family is small, even though they're used to a lifestyle that's now hard to maintain. As for my sister, I haven't shared much about her. The only thing I know is that she's working as a secretary. The reason is that her business degree wasn't from a good university, so it didn't hold much value. On top of that, she wasn't great in the field, and with little experience, a failed business isn't something you want to show off. So, she couldn't land a job, and she didn't even have money to start another business. So now she works as a secretary. That's all the update I have. My aunt and I are fine and continue living our lives, which is what matters.